On a calm afternoon in the small town of Belir, Ohio, on May 7, 2017, a routine visit took a tragic turn. David Kenny, along with his wife Sherry and their young daughter, drove to Brad McGary's home to return a weed trimmer. Brad was a close family friend, affectionately known as Uncle Brad to David's children, making this visit seem ordinary. However, as they approached the house, an unsettling feeling crept over them. No one answered the door despite Brad's car being parked outside. Growing increasingly concerned, the family circled around to the back and found the service door slightly open. As they stepped inside, a chilling silence filled the air, and the house appeared to be in disarray. David decided to investigate further, making his way to the basement, where he was met with a horrifying sight: Brad's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. David Kenny was a young man with a deep sense of loyalty and commitment, particularly towards Sherry, a single mother he fell in love with at the age of 21. Upon meeting Sherry, David felt an instant connection, describing her as the love of his life. This love was not without challenges. Sherry was raising 3 children on her own, and their relationship faced scrutiny from those around them who questioned whether David was ready for such a significant responsibility. Despite the criticism, David was undeterred. He embraced Sherry's children as his own, forming a strong bond with them and committing to build a life together. To ensure a stable future for his new family, David made the tough decision to train as a coal miner. A difficult and risky job, but one that promised a steady income to provide for his wife and children. This choice reflected David's dedication and willingness to face hardships head-on to support those he loved. Brad McGary grew up in a vastly different, yet equally challenging environment. Living openly as a gay man in the conservative town of Cambridge, Ohio, Brad faced prejudice and adversity from a young age. Yet he remained true to himself, refusing to hide his identity despite societal pressures. Initially, Brad pursued a career in hairstyling, a profession that aligned more with his creative side. However, the small working-class town made it difficult for him to find stability in this line of work. Seeking a more secure livelihood, Brad made the bold decision to change his career path entirely, becoming a coal miner, a stark contrast to his former work. This career shift was not just a means of financial stability, but also a step into a different world, one that eventually led him to form a close friendship with David. Their friendship developed quickly, with Brad becoming like family to David. He was affectionately known as Uncle Brad by David's children, who adored him. Brad and David's bond appeared genuine and strong, marked by shared jokes, good times, and mutual support. Yet, beneath the surface of their close friendship lay a secret relationship that would ultimately unravel with devastating consequences. David and Brad's friendship began as an instant connection forged during their coal mining training. They shared similar backgrounds, both hardworking individuals navigating demanding jobs and striving to build stable lives. David welcomed Brad into his family, and Brad quickly became an honorary member, forming a strong bond with David's children, who affectionately called him Uncle Brad. The two friends were inseparable, always sharing laughter and meaningful conversations, developing a friendship that seemed unbreakable from the outside. However, beneath this surface-level camaraderie, their bond developed into something much deeper. Over time, David and Brad's relationship evolved into a secret romantic affair. Despite David's marriage to Sherry, his close friendship with Brad gradually transformed into an intimate connection that they kept hidden from the world. This concealed love affair was carefully shrouded in secrecy, and neither David nor Brad openly acknowledged their relationship. For David, maintaining the illusion of a normal family life was essential, as revealing his affair could have devastating consequences for his marriage, his role as a stepfather, and his public image in their conservative community. For Brad, being in a romantic relationship with a married man was also challenging. As an openly gay man who faced prejudice throughout his life, Brad may have found solace in his deep connection with David. However, the clandestine nature of their relationship likely created tension and emotional turmoil. This secret bond, one rooted in passion yet hidden under the guise of close friendship, laid the groundwork for the tragic events that would eventually unfold, with the pressures of secrecy, loyalty, and conflicting desires converging into a deadly outcome. On May 7, 2017, the day seemed like any other, but events soon took a dark turn. That afternoon, Brad McGary attended a family lunch gathering, appearing relaxed and in good spirits. However, as the gathering was coming to an end, Brad mentioned that he had a meeting later that day and needed to return home. This statement raised no suspicions among his family, as Brad was known to be social and often had plans. He left around 1:30 to 2 p.m., unaware that this would be the last time his family would see him alive. Later that day, David Kenny, his wife Sherry, and their youngest daughter made their way to Brad's house. Their visit was supposed to be a quick and casual one. They were returning a weed trimmer. However, when they arrived, they noticed something felt off. Despite Brad's car being parked outside, there was no answer at the front door. A growing sense of unease gripped them as they knocked repeatedly, only to be met with silence. Concerned, they went around to the back of the house, where they found the service door slightly open. As they stepped inside, they were struck by the sight of the house in disarray. Drawers were open, belongings scattered, and it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. Sherry called out for Brad, hoping for a response that never came. While Sherry searched upstairs, David felt compelled to check the basement. What he discovered there would haunt him forever: Brad's lifeless body lying face down in a pool of blood. David's scream echoed through the house, drawing Sherry to the scene, where she was met with the horrifying sight of their dear friend murdered. In a panic, Sherry called 911, triggering the police investigation into a crime that would reveal a shocking and deadly secret. When police arrived at Brad McGary's house, they were confronted with a chaotic crime scene. Signs of a break-in were apparent: furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, and belongings scattered throughout the home. As they made their way to the basement, they discovered Brad's lifeless body lying face down in a pool of blood, with a fatal gunshot wound to his head. The shocking nature of the discovery immediately raised alarm, and detectives began treating the case as a possible homicide. David Kenny and his wife Sherry were visibly shaken as they explained their connection to Brad. They described him as a close family friend, someone who was like an uncle to their children and who had been part of their lives for years. The couple recounted their earlier visit to Brad's house, intending only to return a weed trimmer, and their shock at finding him dead. The police were told that Brad was openly gay and had recently ended a tumultuous relationship with a man named Scotty, whose last name they didn't know. According to David and Sherry, the relationship had been fraught with conflict, heated arguments, and an overall negative impact on Brad's life. Initially, the police considered the possibility that Brad's death was a suicide, as the disarray in the house suggested a desperate struggle. However, this theory was quickly dismissed when a forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed no weapon near Brad's body. Typically, a weapon would be found close to the deceased if a suicide were the cause, and the absence of such evidence indicated a more sinister scenario. The police then shifted their focus to understanding the dynamics of Brad's relationships, especially with David, Sherry, and the mysterious Scotty, as they began piecing together what led to the grisly murder. As police conducted a detailed analysis of the crime scene, they quickly noted inconsistencies that pointed to a more complex motive behind Brad McGary's death. The house had been ransacked, drawers were open, and furniture was displaced, creating the appearance of a struggle. However, upon closer inspection, detectives noticed that the chaos seemed deliberately staged. Despite the apparent disarray, valuable items throughout the home remained untouched. Brad's television, cash lying openly on the floor, and his collection of rural-style art were all left undisturbed. This led investigators to suspect that the scene was arranged to look like a botched robbery, with the perpetrator intending to mislead the police. As detectives tried to piece together the crime, they explored multiple theories. Given that Brad was an openly gay man living in a small conservative town, the police considered the possibility that his murder was a hate crime, potentially committed by someone who disapproved of his sexuality. The fact that he worked as a coal miner, a profession dominated by traditional and conservative individuals, fueled speculation that one of his colleagues might have targeted him. However, this theory was quickly dismissed after interviewing Brad's coworkers. Instead of harboring animosity towards him, they described Brad as well-liked and respected, with no apparent conflicts in the workplace. With the possibility of a hate crime ruled out and the robbery theory appearing increasingly unlikely, detectives were left with more questions than answers. The staged crime scene and the lack of any obvious motive to steal pointed to a more personal crime. Investigators began to dig deeper into Brad's relationships and private life, hoping to uncover the truth behind his violent death. This search would soon reveal hidden secrets and motives that no one could have anticipated. As the investigation progressed, detectives delved into Brad McGary's personal life, speaking with friends and family to uncover any potential motives for his murder. The most glaring lead was Brad's turbulent relationship with a man named Scotty. Described as toxic and tumultuous, their relationship was fraught with conflict and heated arguments. Friends confirmed that Brad had ended things with Scotty just before his death, leading police to initially consider Scotty as a prime suspect. However, this angle quickly lost traction when they discovered that Scotty had been in jail for violating his probation for the past 3 months, making it impossible for him to have physically committed the murder. Despite his incarceration, detectives did not entirely dismiss the possibility that Scotty might have orchestrated the crime from behind bars, but there was no immediate evidence to support this theory. The breakthrough in the case came when police interviewed one of Brad's cousins, who had been at the family gathering earlier that day. The cousin revealed that on the day of the murder, Brad had left the gathering around 1:30 to 2 p.m., saying he was expecting a visitor, a man named DJ. Brad had even jokingly mentioned that he planned to take a nap with his guest, hinting at an intimate encounter. The cousin went on to disclose that Brad had confided in them about his relationship with DJ, describing it as a long-running affair with a married man who had not come out to his wife. Reluctantly, the cousin finally revealed DJ's true identity: David Kenny, the very man who had discovered Brad's body. This revelation stunned the detectives as it turned the investigation on its head. Until this point, David had been seen as a grieving friend and key witness, shaken by the loss of someone he considered family. The realization that DJ and David were the same person and that they had a secret romantic relationship immediately made David the prime suspect. Investigators now had to confront the possibility that David's connection to Brad was far more complicated than mere friendship, and that he may have had a powerful motive to silence Brad for good. As detectives unraveled the shocking revelation of David's secret relationship with Brad, the investigation took a dramatic turn. David, who had initially been considered a grieving friend and witness, was now firmly in the spotlight as the prime suspect in Brad's murder. This unexpected twist prompted detectives to closely examine David's actions and movements on the day of the killing. The first breakthrough came from David's phone data. Police obtained records that placed his phone at Brad's house during the critical window when the murder occurred. The location data clearly contradicted David's initial statements, which implied that he had only arrived at Brad's house after the crime had already taken place. With this data in hand, the detectives began piecing together a timeline that increasingly pointed to David's presence at the scene during the time of the murder. Further bolstering their case was surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera. The footage captured David driving to Brad's house before the estimated time of the attack. Importantly, he arrived not in his own car, but in his wife's vehicle, perhaps as an attempt to obscure his identity. He stayed at Brad's house for around 40 minutes before leaving. However, hours later, the camera showed David returning to the scene, this time in his own truck, accompanied by Sherry and their young daughter, ostensibly to return a weed trimmer. This sequence of events contradicted David's earlier account and provided crucial evidence linking him to the murder. Detectives began to see the return visit as a way to fabricate a story and establish an alibi. The surveillance footage and phone data presented a strong case against David, and with this mounting evidence, police were convinced they had found their suspect. Now it was time to confront him with the truth and uncover the full extent of his involvement in Brad's death. When confronted with the mounting evidence against him, David Kenny initially maintained his innocence, denying any involvement in Brad's murder. However, as detectives continued to press him and present the inconsistencies in his story, particularly the phone data and surveillance footage, David began to falter. His account of the events on the day of the murder shifted repeatedly, with David offering up to 7 or 8 different versions, each conflicting with the previous. Under intense questioning, David eventually admitted to having an affair with Brad. However, he claimed that their relationship was short-term and downplayed its significance. insisting that he had only been involved with Brad for a few months, not years. He also alleged that on the day of the murder, he had gone to Brad's house to end the affair once and for all, at which point a heated argument broke out. According to David, Brad became angry and threatened him with a gun, prompting a struggle in which David wrestled the gun away and shot Brad in what he claimed was self-defense. He insisted that Brad's death was the result of a desperate and panicked act, not premeditated murder. However, forensic evidence quickly contradicted David's version of events. The autopsy revealed that Brad had been shot twice in the back of the head, indicating an execution-style killing rather than a spontaneous act of self-defense. The trajectory of the gunshots and the fact that Brad was shot from behind made it impossible for David's claim of a face-to-face struggle to hold up. Moreover, David's description of disarming Brad and firing in self-defense did not align with the crime scene or the physical evidence, suggesting that Brad had been caught off guard and shot without warning. This forensic analysis dismantled David's self-defense claim and cast serious doubt on his credibility. The evidence strongly indicated that David had premeditated Brad's murder, executed him in cold blood, and then attempted to cover up his tracks with a staged crime scene and an evolving web of lies. With his confession partially obtained and forensic evidence disproving his story, David's chances of escaping responsibility for the murder diminished rapidly, and detectives felt confident in pursuing a case for first-degree murder. As the investigation into Brad McGary's murder continued, crucial evidence mounted against David Kenny. The autopsy revealed that Brad had been shot twice in the back of the head, a clear indication of an execution-style killing, not an act of self-defense as David had claimed. The forensic findings painted a picture of a calculated, deliberate murder, undermining any suggestion that the shooting occurred during a struggle or in a moment of panic. Furthermore, detectives questioned David about the murder weapon, which was never recovered. David admitted to disposing of the gun, but failed to provide a credible explanation for where or how he got rid of it. The lack of a consistent story regarding the weapon and its disposal only added to the suspicion that David was intentionally covering up evidence of a premeditated crime. With the overwhelming evidence against him, David was formally charged with first-degree murder. During his preliminary court hearing in mid-May 2017, the prosecution highlighted the inconsistencies in his stories. The forensic evidence indicating an execution, and the surveillance footage and phone data that placed David at Brad's house during the murder. Given the severity of the crime and the deliberate actions taken to conceal it, the judge set bail at $1 million. David's defense immediately requested a reduction in bail, arguing that the amount was excessive and beyond David's ability to pay. They portrayed him as a responsible family man and argued that the events leading to Brad's death were complex and unique, suggesting that if a crime had been committed, it was manslaughter rather than murder. Despite these arguments, the judge denied the request for a bail reduction, emphasizing the gravity of the charges and the deliberate nature of the crime. David remained in custody as legal proceedings continued, facing the possibility of life in prison for the murder of Brad McGary. The trial of David Kenny for the murder of Brad McGary became a dramatic and complex legal battle. The prosecution built a compelling case by highlighting the numerous inconsistencies in David's statements. They emphasized his constantly changing story, conflicting explanations about the murder weapon, and the clear forensic evidence showing Brad's execution-style death. The autopsy findings that Brad was shot twice in the back of the head were central to the argument, as they directly contradicted David's claim of self-defense and suggested premeditation. Testimonies played a significant role in the trial. Sherry, David's wife, took the stand, recounting the events of May 7th when she accompanied David and their daughter to Brad's house. She spoke about their arrival, the unsettling discovery, and how David led her to find Brad's body in the basement. Sherry expressed shock and betrayal upon learning about her husband's affair with Brad, confirming that she had no prior knowledge of the relationship or its hidden tensions. Other family members also testified, supporting the character of both Brad and David and giving insight into their lives and relationships. During the trial, a piece of DNA evidence added a new layer of complexity. A used condom found at the scene had Brad's DNA on the outside and the DNA of an unidentified male on the inside, but there was no trace of David's DNA. While this discovery initially raised questions about the nature of Brad's relationships, The prosecution argued that it was unrelated to the murder and did not exonerate David, given the overwhelming evidence against him. After hearing all the testimonies, reviewing the forensic evidence, and considering the defense's arguments, the jury deliberated for several hours. They weighed the inconsistencies in David's story, his motives, and the physical evidence presented during the trial. In the end, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. David Kenny was found guilty of aggravated murder. The conviction was met with gasps and tears in the courtroom as the reality of the verdict set in. David was left to face the consequences of his actions, and Brad's family and friends saw justice served for the cold-blooded murder that took their loved one's life. Following David Kenny's conviction for the aggravated murder of Brad McGary, the sentencing phase brought the case to a tragic conclusion. The judge had the option of 4 different sentencing outcomes, all involving life imprisonment, but varying in the possibility of parole after 20, 25, or 30 years. Considering the calculated nature of the crime, the judge ultimately sentenced David to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 3 years for the use of a firearm during the commission of the murder. The sentence underscored the severity of the act, an execution-style killing followed by deliberate attempts to cover up the crime. During sentencing, the judge reflected on the far-reaching consequences of secrecy and deception. David's efforts to conceal his secret relationship with Brad led to a tragic series of events: betrayal, murder, and the shattering of 2 families. The judge highlighted how the fear of living openly and the desire to maintain a double life had resulted in a senseless death and irrevocable loss for all involved. As of mid-2023, David Kenny remains incarcerated in an Ohio prison, serving out his life sentence without the chance of release. The case stands as a stark reminder of how hidden lives and suppressed truths can lead to devastating outcomes. The murder of Brad McGary left a community in shock, a family grieving, and a once close friendship destroyed by lies, betrayal, and violence. The case of David Kenny and Brad McGary serves as a haunting reminder of the destructive power of secrets, lies, and betrayal. What began as a seemingly unbreakable friendship unraveled into a secret love affair, culminating in a grisly murder that shattered lives. The tragedy lies not only in the loss of Brad's life, but also in the ripple effect that spread to both families, a small-town community, and those who were close to the men involved. This story underscores how hidden desires and deceit can quickly spiral out of control, leaving devastation in their wake. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded of the fragility of human relationships and the importance of truth, honesty, and acceptance. If you found this deep dive into a chilling, true crime story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Stay tuned for more gripping investigations into the darkest corners of real-life mysteries, where we bring you closer to the untold stories of murder, betrayal, and intrigue. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.